come fill in the front.
Bonus points.
Yes, I love it. I love it. Just get right up. Brave souls.
How about our team sit in the front?
Big scary. All right. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. My name is Kara Smalls. I am the Executive Director of Philly Startup Leaders. We help founders, typically tech products, tech companies, find resources to grow and succeed. And when I'm not doing that, I'm the co-founder of City Fit Girls, and we help women find resources for them to prioritize their physical and mental wellness. And so I have a rock star panel with me today. So I want to start by having you all introduce your name, a fun fact. Yes, I went there. And what your institution does to help build healthy cities. So if you don't know, we're talking about health in cities. All of these lovely folks are from Philadelphia, but we will also talk a little bit about what's happening in other cities as well. So your name, fun fact, and what your institution does to build a healthier city.
Are you looking at me?
I am.
Okay.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Lori Actman. I work with the Penn Center of Innovation at the University of Pennsylvania. So we're the organization that works with faculty and students to translate their ideas into startups and companies in the marketplace. So the Penn obviously does a lot of things, I think, to contribute to the health of Penn. Some of you may or may not know, they're the largest employer in the city. We obviously have a huge health system that's expanding, that serves many people and has expanded across the city to make healthcare more accessible to everyone. I'm much more on the creation side of Penn. So what I've seen a lot of since I've been there for the past 5 years is the creation and invention of some very amazing technologies and therapies to help save lives, to help improve public health, to help improve mobility. So there's a whole spectrum of ways that some of these ideas, I think, contribute to quality of life. We also have some programs that directly engage with communities in Philadelphia. And I guess a fun fact about me is, well, my son's bar mitzvah is Saturday night, so coming off of a huge positive event with a lot of great energy and a big party, which was a great way to launch into South by and the Amplify Philly House. So it's great to be here.
Awesome. Hey everybody, my name is Rob Puglisi, and I work for Thomas Jefferson University in Philadelphia. I'm the director of innovation and design there. I've only been there for 8 months, so I guess I'm still learning the title. And prior to that, I was an emergency medicine pharmacist. And at Jefferson, I co-founded a place called the Health Design Lab. And the Health Design Lab is a space where we use design thinking to try to solve some of the largest challenges in health. And we look at health on a very broad scale, thinking about, social determinants, but also, everything in between from birth to, when they get to our door and in the health system. Fun fact about me is I used to be a singer and a DJ, so I was really geeking out pretty hardcore last night with DJ Jazzy Jeff here, and I've actually kind of been able to find my dream job and get into a place where I can bridge the world of kind of the health world and the creative world, so I'm lucky, very lucky.
You were probably in the spot he was standing last night.
I know, hallowed ground.
Channeling his energy.
Hopefully.
I'm Tracy Brala. I am VP of Ecosystem Development for the University City Science Center in Philadelphia. The Science Center is a nonprofit organization whose mission is really connecting folks and turning bright ideas, or people's bright ideas, into businesses, and really nurturing the 21st century economy workforce. And what does that all mean? It really is about bringing people together in the Philadelphia community to learn from each other. The Science Center is actually owned by 31 different shareholders, which are all research and universities. So these guys are our shareholders. And really, as an organization like that, our goal is really convening the ecosystem in Philadelphia. And that is really many areas. We have a team called First Hand that really is educating middle school and high school age students and helping them learn and grow, which ultimately helps the city to become a healthier city, because it really is educating the workforce. It's getting folks interested in the STEAM areas. Another aspect of my team is something called Venture Café. And so we have a weekly gathering that's really focused on bringing the community together and then educating them on all different kinds of areas that might be affecting health as well. We'll talk about lots of more things. My fun fact is I was a diver in college on the Villanova swim team. So.
I didn't share a fun fact, so my fun fact is I am getting ready for another half marathon after having a stress fracture late last year and healing from that. Now I'm back running again, so I'm excited about that. Cool. Can you raise your hand if you are not from Philadelphia area for context? Okay. Awesome. So first question is an easy one. So what does a healthy city look like for you? So you can answer on like a macro level or just talk about something really specific, but I'm really curious to you all, like, what does a healthy city look like?
I'm happy to start again. Well, one good thing, especially for those of you not from Philadelphia, is our current mayor, Mayor Kenny, I think has really prioritized some elements of what I consider to be a fundamental part of a healthy city, which is quality public school in a walkable neighborhood with a well-funded library and a rec center available to kids to go to after school, so that you have like a community infrastructure to help keep kids on the right track. There's a lot of answers to that question, but I just really wanted to highlight something that I think has seen some progress in Philadelphia, and that's going to take many years, but I think he has launched that, and that's important. I think previous to this mayor, we had a mayor that really focused on a lot of quality of life improvements, Mayor Nutter, such as farmers market, bike lanes, parks, a lot of amenities, making those amenities, I think, more of a priority in Philadelphia. He really wanted to catch us up to other cities like New York. He launched our first sustainability plan, and now it's a permanent office in Philadelphia. So our government is now measuring a lot of the kind of environmental sustainability qualities of life that I think are important and fundamental to a city. I think our city still has ways to go on the poverty front and some of our mortality rates, and I'm sure others will talk about that. The good news is I think that the citizens of Philadelphia and the region are much more aware of some of the gaps in our kind of healthy infrastructure, and I think there's a lot of momentum to support efforts to fill those gaps so everyone can actually have a better quality of life.
Yeah, I agree. There are some good things happening in Philly. There's definitely a lot that we can do to improve things. I mean, for me, a healthy city prioritizes, access, inclusion, and representation and diversity, right? So thinking about not just accessing healthcare, but all of the things that contribute to health, accessing food, accessing space, accessing money, accessing prosperity, representation, right? Making sure that the people who have these needs are represented in decision-making places so that they can the needs can meet what their realities truly are. And diversity, again, making sure that we are taking advantage of the beautiful amount of diversity that we have in Philadelphia and using it as a strength and creating health from that environment. And it's a little aspirational, but I think that if we could do those things better, we'd be much better off.
That's great. I obviously agree with everything that you said, and I'll take a little bit of a different angle on it, which I think one of the best assets that Philadelphia has is it's a city of many communities. And so there's lots of neighborhoods, and people have pride in their neighborhoods, and they really take advantage of that. And I think we can do better because we can ultimately join those neighborhoods, and we can do things like getting folks more access to some of those vital things that are absolutely necessary, and working to make sure that the divide that does exist among neighborhoods is actually crossed. And I think there's a lot of programs that are in place, but there's also opportunities for us to continue to evolve to get those communities to come together.
Right. So obviously health is influenced by a lot of factors, right? Social, economic, access to healthy foods, and resources for you to have a quality of life. So when you talk about programs, I want to start with you, Robert. What are some programs that that you all are doing at Jefferson to truly help communities get the resources they need to have quality of life?
Yeah, I think too. I wanted to talk some statistics. I think I can throw that in there here. We're already talking about some of the good things that we're doing in Philadelphia, and I think we're all having a really great time at Amplify. But I always kind of take it upon myself to be a downer sometimes. So here's So there's a lot of things that we need to improve in Philly, right? So for one, we are the largest, poorest city in America. Of the top 10 cities, we have the most, the highest levels of poverty. We're seeing a 25% general poverty rate across Philadelphia. And the thing that's really awful is when you look at that breakdown across different races and classes, you see, for example, Hispanic children, the poverty rate shoots up to above 50%. Right? So if you're an Hispanic child, there's a 50-50 chance that you live in a place of poverty, and that's incredible. It's proven that lower income equals shorter life. So when we're talking about health, we're talking about prosperity. And you can see increased rates of diseases in areas who are high with higher poverty, and you see a 20-year lifespan gap between the people who are at the highest levels of prosperity in our city and the lowest, a 20-year expected lifespan, or difference in expected lifespan. And the other thing I recently learned was that the top 3 causes of death in Philadelphia, 1 is heart disease, 2 is cancer, and 3 is drug-related death. So, which is, again, unbelievable. We had about 1,270 deaths related to drug-related overdoses in 2017, right? So, we're talking about programs that I think we have to keep all of those things in perspective, right? Because, for example, with the opioid use disorder, I know a lot of people have probably heard about the opiate crisis in Philadelphia. Well, one of the things that we try talking about with our programs is if we want to if opiate use disorder and drug-related death is number 3 cause of death in Philadelphia, then we have to start treating it like we do heart disease and cancer. It's a chronic disease. And if we can start talking about it that way, then maybe we can start to change things.
Great. Anyone else want to share that?
Sure. At the Science Center, we have a program called our First Hand program, and our First Hand program is an opportunity for middle and high school age children to kind of come to the Science Center once a week for their science and technology, engineering, math classes. The kids come in, they put a lab coat on, and it really introduces them to what it's like to be a scientist, what that feeling is. But it's not just about science, and we do lots of great programs that, they're using sustainable materials. We give the kids healthy snacks. They actually ride public transportation. We give them free passes on our SEPTA system, which is our regional transportation system in Philadelphia. And so we actually give them an opportunity to experience that as well. But then it's that hands-on learning, and it's about evolving and teaching them 21st century skills. They're often working in teams, so they're learning how to solve some of these issues themselves. Recently, every 10 weeks or so, they have a showcase where they graduate based on what those lessons were. And one of the teams was problem solving around the opioid crisis. And so when you have these 9th and 10th graders, I guess these guys were 10th graders, talking about solving the problems, it takes on a very different position, because then they're going back to their community, they're going back to their high schools, and they're talking to it among their friends. And it gives them kind of this level of expertise, which is really a very fundamental program in terms of evolving the conversation and ultimately making it better.
Okay. So the City of Philadelphia's Department of Public Health, they do an annual report, Health in the City report. If you are not familiar with it, you should. It's really insightful. And I want to read something really quickly that's in that report and then ask a question. So they said, living just a couple of miles away can reduce life expectancy by nearly 20 years. Income inequality and life expectancy are directly correlated. That is, neighborhoods with more individuals in the lowest income brackets have significantly lower life expectancy than neighborhoods with more individuals in the highest income bracket. Neighborhoods with higher income gaps are also much more likely to have higher proportions of racial ethnic minorities. And so I think about how much of this is we need more money in order to get more resources, in order to bring programs into communities, versus how much of this we just need more behavioral changes, and how much of this onus is on the leaders in this city. I mean, I think about our public education. I mean, how much do you learn about health as a child when you're in the inner city versus when you're in the suburbs? And so, I mean, this is a loaded question, but just with what, you know, the health report just stated, like, what can we do? What can we do? But more importantly, what can the leaders in the city do?
Well, that's a really big question, and there's a lot of historic, political, and social factors that go into this income inequality program, and I think the health lens puts a really fine point on, you're actually going to die earlier if you're born at, 3rd and Lehigh than, you live at the corner of Brala and Kinwood and Lower Merion. So, and again, I think it's something that everyone is aware of. There's a lot of fundamental things that I think can help with this, which is pathways to education and jobs. Philadelphia has, up until recently, been losing jobs in the city itself that were accessible by public transit. So I think the tech community, actually in particular, is helping to reverse the trend, new infrastructure like what the Science Center has built, what Penn is trying to do, all these new incubators, keeping college graduates in the city and building their businesses here. So there's a lot of macro factors that can, I think, over time help with this. But I think some of our structural pathways have been broken. I'm actually I'm a huge public advocate for public education. I serve on the board of my school district. And so for me, a lot of this really does go back to disinvestment and lack of support for public education in Philadelphia and the state as a whole. And I don't want to get too political about why that's happened. I think we're starting to see the trend reverse. But that's been a huge structural problem. And I think if we could improve the quality of education that was accessible to everyone, which again is not an easy thing to do, that would help a lot. There's also a lot of cultural factors that go into, we're all brought up by a set of cultural factors that our parents bring and surround us with. And so there are ways, if you don't find healthy lifestyle choices being made in your house, that can be really hard to overcome. I think there are ways to overcome it. I know Penn runs a lot of programs to help educate new mothers, for instance, on healthy eating and healthy lifestyles. I know folks who work with the Head Start programs in Philadelphia, which is federally funded, and that's getting 3- and 4-year-olds started in school early. There's a lot of focus on health education for the kids there. For me personally though, I think the biggest thing our leaders could do is really continue to focus on better funding public education.
And then I just ask if everybody make sure you speak into the mic.
I was going to just jump in and say one of the things that we've done at the Science Center is really created this collaborative community. And the goal of that, and around kind of the U City Square area, is really about bringing the different communities together. On the first floor of our building, we have something called, well, we have a place called Quorum, and it has 2 floors. The second floor is the meeting room space, and that's kind of where people would come with a couple hundred people to come and have a meeting. And it's really a very much a community asset. But the first floor is really the community asset because it's a drop-in lounge. It is free and open to the public, free Wi-Fi access, and it really is meant to be a touchdown space. So anyone can come in there during the week, sit there for half an hour, sit there for an hour, and just have an opportunity to interact. And that's really powerful. And there's a lot of other parks that we have as well, which are attempting to bridge that divide. And we have a commitment on our team. My team actually manages those spaces to say, how can we do better from a community asset standpoint? How can we do better from a programming standpoint to make sure that since we sit kind of right between West Philadelphia and the University City District, how do we make sure that we bridge the gap? One of the things that we also do is through something called Venture Café. Venture Café happens every single Thursday from 3 to 8 p.m. We are very focused on having a diverse group of speakers and presenters and representation from the community. How do we have community tabling that's happening there? That's really the folks that are in the West Philadelphia community. So it's not just the same people coming and talking to ourselves, but it's showcasing them and showcasing their talents. And then ultimately that is fostering the ecosystem because it's really educating folks and making them rise up and feel better that they're part of the solution. And I feel like we're doing a lot of empowering in that way.
Yeah, sure. One of the things I'm a big believer is of kind of small solutions to big problems. And I think it kind of touches on, what you were saying, Tracy, about our communities. If you get out there in the communities and you spend some time there and you see what people are doing to try to kind of overcome these challenges, there are some really incredible examples of these hyper-local individuals or groups who are making big strides to improve the lives of people in their community. I've met a number of people who have organizations of one person. I know one person who feeds 20 families. She spent the last 2 decades feeding basically, making sure that the people around her block have enough food to eat. And if anybody here is kind of familiar to design thinking, the first step is that concept of empathy. So I think one of the things that from the top down that we need to do is really understand people, right? Because you'll see once you get into the community and you start talking to people, especially me coming from a healthcare background, immediately I want to talk about healthcare. I'm like, what do you take your blood pressure medication? When's the last time you saw a doctor? When we try having conversations with some of those those folks, especially in neighborhoods like Kensington, they were like, we don't want to talk about that. I want to talk about safety. I can't even leave my house, and I don't feel safe leaving my house. Or food, food access is a big problem. So, how can you have a conversation about healthcare or these bigger, larger problems if we aren't even addressing kind of basic needs? So, and I think about what can our leaders do, and again, really getting into these communities and understanding them and starting from that place of empathy is really important.
And it's interesting, so thanks for bringing up mental health. So last night, I don't know, who was here last night? Yeah. Burned a lot of calories. So right before all the dancing, Tony Luke Jr. from Tony Luke's, cheesesteaks, he was on stage singing a cheesesteak song, and then he sung another song. And as he was leaving out, and for context, I've been vegan for about 8 years. I don't try to get other people to become vegan, but this is just the lifestyle I chose, and so I kind of had no interest in really talking about cheesesteaks. And then Tony and I ended up talking about mental health and addiction. And he, if you know his story, he lost his son to a drug addiction 2 years ago. I was sharing with him that I lost my mother to drug addiction 10 years ago. And we ended up talking for an hour about mental health awareness, and how so many people just do not talk about it, whether it's about themselves or other people that they support. And so what I want to know from you all is, have your institutions talked about mental health at all? And if so, in what way? Maybe it's with some of the startups at Penn. Maybe obviously the work you were doing in Kensington, and I think about the work that's happening in West Philly, and you all providing at Science Center a space for people to feel comfortable and confident, and I know that helps with your mental health a lot. So how does mental health show up in the work that you do, if it does?
It's showing up a lot right now, both on kind of the tech side and the non-tech side. So one thing that's been amazing that I've been really gratified to see in the past year, we have some incredible faculty researchers starting companies, and I think this is kind of happening, that there's seeds of this happening across the country and other innovation centers. Neuroscientists are really starting to delve into this space, and a lot of folks are saying, kind of mental health is where cancer was 20 years ago, that understanding the brain and all these factors that influence addiction and behavior, and also, I think, very prominent in many people's lives are challenges with dementia and, the aging process and the disintegration of the mind, which is a really painful thing for anyone who has to go through it with a parent. So we're seeing a lot of innovation, and actually we brought 4 startups in the neuro space, and also I should add PTSD, and especially military returning back. We had a startup here that we brought to South by 2 years ago, NeuroFlow. The mayor famously tried on, there's a great photo of him with their headset. But there's been a lot more interest in that space, both on the research side and on the venture side. So I'm really hopeful that we'll start to see some solutions for some of these challenges that are really hard to address. And I guess I should mention, from the Penn perspective, and there's been a lot of talk about this in the press nationally, but kids are showing up to college and without enough resiliency to kind of manage their lives in many cases, and so maybe it's the fault of parents, and you hear about helicopter parenting, but what Penn has found, and a lot of other universities have found, that there's kind of a mental health crisis with some kids on campus. Over the past few years, Penn has had some pretty high-profile suicides, which have been extremely tragic, because you also think about, these are kids who have had to perform at a high level their whole lives to even make it into Penn, no matter their background or circumstances. So Penn is really invested in the mental health resources on campus. They just appointed someone to head a new center. And I would also be remiss if I didn't add that Penn has really invested in resources to help first-generation low-income students. So we've seen both an influx of diversity of those students and amazing resources to help them. Some of them are just such superstars. I've had a chance to work with them because they're applying for some of the innovation prizes around campus. And their personal stories are just incredible of, how they got exposed to entrepreneurship in high school because they went to the flea markets in Oakland to, try to support their families, and that gave them the hustle to really get interested. So that working with them and seeing the new resources makes me really hopeful, and also this new research and technology that in 5 years maybe will feel really different. There's also, and then I'll stop talking, a few new startups that are specifically focused on challenges with opioid addiction. And so there's lots of people interested in finding innovative solutions to that particular problem, which has been so on the front page in Philly for the last year.
Yeah, I think one of the common things I'm hearing from you guys is, I feel like it's this concept of agency, right? If you can give somebody agency, you can start giving them, empowering them to have these conversations that could lead you, talking about infrastructure, infrastructure means a lot of things, give them that path to finding help, right? If we're talking about mental health, maybe that's connecting with somebody who's had a similar struggle to them, maybe that means connecting with, somebody, a clinician who can help them. And creating space for those conversations is really important. So there's a number of programs we have at Jefferson that is looking at what can we do to get out in the community and to connect with people. One of the ones that I'm really proud about is one called Collab Philadelphia, which really grew out of those conversations that we had with people in the community when they were talking about food and safety. When we were trying to talk about healthcare, we realized, well, I don't think we know what you really need because we're not there talking to you. So we created this idea of a platform that we can bring out into the community and have these conversations, create a safe space where people can collaborate around these needs in the community to talk about things like mental health. Maybe it starts with a big shiny Airstream trailer, which is what this thing's going to look like when it's done this summer. But whatever it takes to get somebody to engage with us and have that conversation. I think that's the most important thing, and that's the point of that, is to encourage people to engage, to show them that we're there not with a plan, really. We're not there to push anything onto people. We just want to be there showing that we're invested, we want to invest in their community and in the lives they live. So I think the more connections we can make with people in our communities, the better, and the better we can do to close these issues,
So I started out the conversation by saying the Sino Center helps turn bright ideas into businesses, and we do that through our commercialization programs. And so our commercialization programs, there's two of them. One is IC at 3401, and another one is our Digital Health Accelerator. And we've had really great success with companies coming out of there that are learning and growing and ultimately responsible for a lot of jobs within the Philadelphia marketplace. But really, it is some of the technology that's there now. A lot is focused on caregivers and helping caregivers when they leave, when a patient's leaving the hospital, a company called Episodic, when the company's leaving the hospital, that the caregiver is actually prepared to care for the patient so they don't come back in. We have another business that's there called Concierge, which is also for folks whose parents are aging, and giving them that peace of mind and recognizing that mental health comes in many different ways and many different forms and many different stressors. And so really those technology-based solutions are really a way that some of our programs are helping to fight the issues of mental health.
Again, for those who do not live in Philadelphia, can you raise your hand and then can you scream out what city you're from so we can know?
DC, but really bold. Gothenburg, Sweden.
St. Louis.
New York.
France.
France?
Yeah. Brooklyn.
Norway? Awesome. So, thank you all for sharing. So I'm curious of anything you've seen in other cities as it relates to helping their residents with their quality of life. Any programs or any institutions that you believe are doing really great work outside of Philadelphia that maybe Philly can replicate or learn from?
Can we ask them?
Yeah, I will. Yeah, so I'll be curious about you guys first, and then I do want to hear from the audience.
One obvious challenge in the United States is universal health care and access to health care. So, this has obviously been a big issue in our national politics. And I think finding good solutions there is going to be really important for our country, especially when you read about the price of insulin going from $90 to $900, that there's a problem. In terms of just healthy infrastructure, and there's lots of statistics about access to trails and parks and, fresh food in terms of a healthy lifestyle. I always love coming to Austin because I think Austin has an amazing, healthy infrastructure. I love the trail along the river where everyone's out there all the time biking, and there's kayaking. I think Philadelphia has put a lot more of that in place. And I think Philadelphia could learn probably from some of the healthier food choices of other cultures. I think that's still a challenge for us. But nothing comes to mind offhand. But one thing I am wondering about, because I've traveled a bit in the past few months, and every new city, including DC, it's like the scooters are all over. And I know they're kind of like making their way into Philadelphia, and I just wonder if that's going to be a good thing or bad thing for safety and health, especially because I guess if you're mobility challenged, it's nice to have a scooter, so I don't want to deny anyone that.
Blind people leaving in the middle of the road like they do.
Yeah, but I just feel like it's generally a good thing to walk. So I'm just a little confused about the scooter thing, but anyway.
Anyone else? And that's okay if not.
Yeah, I mean, I'll talk real quick. I mean, I think, you know, Chicago, I learned a lot about Chicago and their Complete Streets initiative, and that was really interesting to me to see what they did there regarding talking about the street as being kind of like an extension of the sidewalk, right? Giving people access to more space that is around them. Especially if you look at how much space in cities is taken up by cars, or spaces for cars. It's insane how much wasted space here. Imagine if even half of that was turned into green space. You know, you'd see an incredible impact on people's health outcomes if you saw changes like that. And talking about like that last mile stuff, right? Talking about like scooters and things like that. Yes, I don't know, I'd like to know what the cost benefit is of like injuries from scooters to improving access to jobs and things like that with last mile initiatives like that. But then there's good examples, I mean, right in Philly with like Indigo did it pretty good, right? Indigo,
Yes, we did. Yes.
Indigo did a really great job at addressing this need for, you know, last mile solutions that are accessible and they're in the places that need it most. But they're not electric. That's true. That's true.
They just rolled out, let's see. See, now I'm going to go down a rabbit hole. They just rolled out a test program for electric bikes.
Well, Philly's pretty flat. So we're in San Diego, or San Francisco, I mean, and I want electric. I think we're good.
Okay, did you? Cool. So I do want to go rogue here. And make it a little conversational. I think it's really great to have so many different people from across the world here. And I'd be curious from some audience members what you've seen in your city that works and maybe what doesn't work, right? We're all dealing with challenges and successes around health in our cities. So if there are a few brave souls to kind of let us know what's happening in your city, I'll give you a mic. No, there's a mic.
Somebody had their hand up? No? So who's here from Sweden? Did you say you're from Sweden? I'd love to hear from you. You got to share something. Yeah.
Okay, well, what we're doing now is actually trying to reduce a lot of the car traffic in the city center. So turning into like, not really taking away the cars, but really reduce the speed. So sometimes they have like these new streets where they give priority to pedestrians and bicycles and so on. So the car needs to go in like 10 kilometers per hour, really slow if it wants to go into that street. And that has actually made it much more attractive. So a lot of jobs come into the city center and new cafes and things are opening. So I think that's one of the things. Cool. And a free school lunch is.
So one of the things that I would say from Philly that I think is really an interesting take on what a healthy city is actually our mural arts program. Because I believe it actually brings a lot of beautification to the neighborhoods and to the cities. And it is something that kind of codifies the community together. And I do think that that is health related in the sense that people are proud of those murals that are there. They're proud of kind of how it's transformed a block or a neighborhood. So something a little unique to Philly that other cities have, but certainly we're the largest mural arts program in the United States.
So, and if anyone else want to share, I definitely want to make sure we hear from a few more folks. Something that comes to mind for me is yesterday there was a panel, Who Got the Jazz? It was Bridget Daniel and a few other great folks on the panel. And one, her name is Erin, and she was from Cleveland, Ohio, and she's talking about a pilot program that she wants to introduce for entrepreneurs, underserved entrepreneurs, where not only do they give you like the mentorship and the education in terms of building your company, but they're also going to give you a 6-month residency. And so there are just these different things that they're implementing to help lower the barrier for an entrepreneur to grow their business. And while it's not like a health, it's not portrayed as this health initiative, it is essentially helping someone's quality of life, giving them a roof over their head and then resources that they need in order to build their company. And so that for me was an aha. And when I asked her where she got the funding from, luckily she said there was a lot of, I think, private-public funding to support this, and I'm not sure we have that many opportunities in Philadelphia to do something like that for the entrepreneurs who need it the most in our city. So I'd be curious, again, it doesn't necessarily have to be a specific health initiative, but there's something that's happening in other cities we would love to hear about that still supports someone's quality of life. Yes, here comes a mic.
Yeah. One of the most interesting things I've seen, and it comes out of Bogota, Colombia, is something called ciclovias, where they're doing it in Brownsville, they've done it in Baltimore, and essentially it's giving the streets back to people. Bogota, Colombia, as everybody knows, was you couldn't go there without being killed in the cartels. What they did was essentially, think of a block party, but think of a block party that's a mile long. And essentially what it allowed people to do was come back into the streets. I work near Johns Hopkins, so East Baltimore is all like this. And so say someone wanted to get health care, for example. They can come out into the streets on a day, everything's cut off. You have police presence, it's safe, theoretically. But people would walk a mile with their children to bring them to, say, Johns Hopkins. So, and you had everybody in the streets where they weren't in the streets before. And initially, a lot of the businesses didn't like it because you were cutting off, say, their auto traffic. But they've become incredibly popular in towns like Bogota. I met the mayor of Brownsville. He said it was one of the most successful things he'd ever done in his town. So it's a very simple initiative in a sense, but it has to be well coordinated. And that seems to empower people to come back into their streets and to go from point A to point B, et cetera, et cetera. So,
yeah, thank you for sharing. Yes, oh, now the hands won't stop. This is great. So the last two, and then we'll.
So I go to school at St. Louis University, and something that's like small scale, like you were talking about, that they've implemented at my school that I think is really cool is like in the greater St. Louis area, they talk a lot about the lack of access to like feminine hygiene products because you have these machines that are in all these bathrooms but they're empty and there's just no access, and it's a huge problem for even students who attend St. Louis University to access these products. And so like throughout our campus, they've had these dispensers that just have free feminine products, like, and then they're refreshed daily. And I think that's a really cool initiative that I hope can like start moving out into the city that I was impressed by.
Will in the back.
So I know we were talking about what other cities are doing, but one of the things that I think are most interesting in like the health space that I've seen over the last couple of years is actually a company called the Global Village Jam. So essentially Global Village is an organization that facilitates these creative jams where they let artists or even just folks who just want to come out and sing, dance, and express themselves in some way. And what I've seen in just being a part of that community over the past couple of years is that when you give folks kind of that space to express themselves, like that expression kind of promotes this idea of identity, and then that identity promotes this idea of pride. And I've seen these young people go from not being in tune to their physical health, they've been entrepreneurs and kind of on that no days off, never not working idea, but then through these jams, they become so much more self-aware, and then they get so much more empowered to want to explore ideas like meditation. They want to explore these ideas of how do I become a whole being and a physically fit person. So sometimes I think like in our city, because we have these stereotypes around like, entrepreneurship, great, go so hard, we forget that even just expressing yourself can lead to these empowering ideas that want you to go after and chase the health and all these other things that we know are so important. So I think I just want to challenge everyone to check out the Global Village because it's super simple. They pass around some microphones and they come and they play instruments, but what I've seen it do on like the internal is so empowering to not only Philadelphia, but to a lot of inner cities around the world. So I think that's kind of super clever.
Thanks. So, panelists, thanks, Will, for actually bringing up awareness. And so around awareness and what's happening in our city, how can, this is a two-part, so you can answer one or both, how can individuals and communities across the city learn about some of the initiatives and offerings that are taking place to help them with their quality of life? But then on the flip side, how can leaders in the city or people with the most resources learn about what communities truly need in order to truly live a quality life, right? So how can we make sure that communities and individuals educate themselves, but then how can the people with the resources educate themselves and serve in those communities? You can answer one side of both.
So from my perspective, the first thing that comes to mind is really this program, Venture Café, and I'll talk about it again, in the sense that it really is about leveraging the great things that are already happening within the city. And so it's about partnerships. There's many organizations that have and continue to do great things, and having a place for them all to come together and not recreate the wheel gives an opportunity for folks to just know that it's there, it's a safe space, they're going to come in, they're going to meet new and interesting people and exciting people, and they're going to learn about the great things that are already happening within our city. So I think it is about finding those hyper-local individuals who are doing those great things, and I guess we keep saying the buzzword of South by Southwest this year is telling stories, but it's like, how do we get those stories more fully articulated to folks, and then have folks know that they're there? Because when that individual comes in who is the community leader, they're also bringing in their group of people with them as well, and then it exposes people to different conversations that they might not have had. We purposely put programming together that is very different. So one night we had art therapy and fintech startups on the same night, because we really wanted folks who were going to network with each other and have conversations with each other, who are bringing a very diverse perspective than they might otherwise.
I love the idea of partnerships too, because how can we truly make sure this work is not done in silos either?
Yeah, and so I guess I have a somewhat similar perspective. I also think the idea of starting small. So in what I do, we do a lot of piloting of things. And we also, a big thing we work on with our startups is you don't have to build the whole thing. It's like the famous Zappos story. He had this idea, the founder, that he could sell shoes on the internet. So we put up a fake website, and someone would order shoes, and he would go down to the store and buy the shoes and ship it to them to see if that could scale. So we've done a lot of that through our community programming, and also through the way we kind of coach startups at Penn. And there are some examples of very locally based programs in Philadelphia, which I think are doing good things, that if given the right attention or support could scale. And that's the way I like to think about things. I like, solutions that could work on a small scale, but the best ones hopefully you could grow so more people get access to them. So I think the key is finding the local, innovators who are doing that, and finding ways to scale, whether it's them or scaling it through an existing system. That's why I really like, something like a library or a rec center or public school, because that's existing infrastructure where you can scale resources. There's a lot of resources now being scaled through the Philadelphia Public Libraries, actually focus specifically on entrepreneurs and startups that are underserved. So we direct a lot of people in neighborhoods to their libraries now, because and I think there's a lot of partners to those programs too. So those are just a few examples in terms of what you're asking.
Yeah, and I think kind of like a scaled example of what we just did here. I think our role is, my goal is, being a part of a large organization, is to provide opportunities to give voice to people. To allow people to tell their story, to encourage them to tell their story, and to lift them up and to hopefully give them the resources to do something about it. I think that's what we're all kind of trying to do here is empower others to do things that are impactful. And one of my favorite things to do to kind of stop being so negative about stuff and be more positive, my favorite stuff to do is learn about stuff like exactly what you were just talking about with, what was it called? It was Global Village,
yeah.
right? Because at face value, you're like, all right, so people are getting around and they're playing music. But then you dive into it and you learn about it, and you learn about people are meeting each other, people are discovering that they have a power, they have a talent, that they have, you know, all these abilities.
Relieving stress.
Yeah, immediately you start seeing all these benefits, and these things are happening everywhere in our city. So the more that, you know, we get out there and we find these people and we talk about them and we say, talk about yourself, and that's what gets me really excited. And there's so much opportunity for that in Philly.
Okay, so I just have like a lightning round, just a one or the other, very quick. It's only 3. And then I want to, if we have any audience questions, okay? You have a millisecond to think of your answer. Bikes or scooters? Bikes or scooters?
Bikes.
Scoot.
Bike. Okay. This is important. Water ice or water ice?
I'm from the Scoop, so it's water ice.
I'm from New York, and somebody made fun of me the other day for saying water ice. So it's water ice now.
Yeah, I'm water ice.
Interesting. A healthy mind or a healthy body?
Both?
Yeah. Healthy mind leads to healthy body.
Yeah, I'd have to say healthy mind probably is what's going to save you. Healthy body will allow you to be happier.
Okay. Did you answer?
I'd say healthy mind as well.
Okay. All right. Any audience questions? Wow, look at all those hands. Going one. Yes, I see your elbow. Okay.
What's up, y'all?
Hi, Ryan.
Hey, good afternoon. So I'm really interested in how we push public policy and how we get the government to start reacting to all these discoveries we're making in a much more startup, entrepreneurial way. It takes a long time to make change at the government level, but that's really how we make large systemic changes. So how do we make changes from the government viewpoint on this topic?
Good question.
Well, based on, I have I had the privilege to have like a 2-year stint in local government in Philly. The first thing I'll say is government is amazing, and I'm really worried that given our political climate right now, that less people will be attracted to working in government. And I also agree with, I can't remember, maybe Luke remembers who this famous quote is from, but like being mayor is the best job in the world if you're interested in making change, because unlike other levels of government, you could like start a program and see immediate impact. So there's a lot of, I think, innovators that none of us know, although I would say Philadelphia has an innovation lab that is trying to bring innovation throughout government. It's really hard to innovate in large infrastructure with kind of lots of long political memory and folks who have been there a long time. But I think there's a lot of amazingly talented and dedicated people in government. Over the past year, actually, our local paper has profiled some of our people, some of the people who work for the streets department and who work for like collecting trash. I mean, they love their jobs because they see immediate impact in what they do in improving the city. So I'll answer your question now, which is I think there's a lot of opportunity to innovate in local government, it's really important to have a leader or a mayor who is interested in innovation, because it's hard to make people change. And that goes for any large bureaucracy. So you really do need someone to set the tone from the top down. But all the worst political battles happen in the middle with the people who have been there and the new people. And so you need someone at the top who's going to have your back when you're talking to someone who's been there for 20 years saying, actually, we'd like to introduce a change to this process which will allow X, Y, and Z. Let's try it out. So a lot of those battles are cultural. So I think it can be done, but I think everyone needs to pay attention and also show up and vote, because a lot of the friction in the system happens when the middle is not the ones who are like engaged and brought along. And a lot of those people are also elected officials who you've probably never heard of. At least that's how Philadelphia government works. So I think it's possible. I've seen it. Our mayors have done it. It's just hard. So.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that answer. Thank you for that question. So we have to wrap up. So if you have anything to contribute, we'll just make it a conversation after this. But thank you so much for your time, Lori, Robert, Tracy. And thank you everyone for hanging with us. Please continue to enjoy the Amplify Philly House. Again, my name is Kiara Smalls. On Mondays, we wear pink and talk about health and city. So thanks everyone.